Today we're beginning a brand new preaching series called Stone Love. Not stoned. If you take a look inside your Ignite magazine, you'll see we have a preaching series coming up in November dealing with how to live in recovery. We'll talk about that then. But today, stone love, meaning what's solid, what's real. What are the things in this world, in this life, that you can count on time after time after time after time? And we're going to be unpacking the stories of some of the characters that you've heard of today in either in the scripture or on the video, to learn those hard life lessons when it comes to when life gets rough. Where can I turn to? What's real? What can I depend upon? This past weekend was a spectacular weekend for my family and I. My brother Rodney is in town, and he came in with his son. And many of you have met my other nephew, but you've not met Rodney's son. So he is here today, as well as another good friend of mine. And we had a great time of celebration around an accomplishment that he has done. And we've had some childhood friends from Indiana also come. And I was saying to my brother as we were kind of digesting the events of the weekend, I said, I am so grateful that they chose to come. Because, when you have good friends, time can just make, relationships kind of, to be strained because you simply are not around each other all the time. But having them there reminded me of our love for one another. And it reminded me of the kinship, the connection that we share. And I realized that that's real. So although time has passed and geographical differences have come up in our lives, it's those relationships that I can count upon. So I ask you now to reflect upon your own life. What are those relationships in your life that you can count upon? What are those relationships that are so solid, it's like a stone? You can count on it time and them after time, and the occasion after time. I invite you now to bow your hearts with me in a word of opening prayer. We look towards you and say, thank you, God, for your presence and your gifts. That truly you have matched us and superseded us in terms of giving. That even though we tried to catch up with you, as the old gospel song says, you can never beat God's giving. So we're grateful that you care for us so much that you put into our hearts and into our lives things that are indeed solid. And I pray that each and every one of us here and those who would listen to this message would truly find what's real in our lives. Bless you, God, as you bless us. In your name we pray. Amen. As you think about those relationships, and why do relationships crumble? Why is it that they change over time? Oftentimes we have an expectation of someone else, and things change. Sometimes people die. All the time, people die. And our hearts are broken, because now it's been a shift, a change. Sometimes and oftentimes people disappoint us. We have a particular expectation, they don't live up to it, and we're disappointed. Oftentimes we're disillusioned when it comes to people, thinking that they're one thing, but then we discover there's someone else. Oftentimes we can kind of flip that around to say, we know what it feels like when someone is disillusioned with us. I would venture to say that everyone in this room has experienced some type of disappointment from someone else when they think we are somebody else. And then we tell them, no, that's not who I am. This is who I am. And their minds are blown and they end the relationship. And you kind of are left wondering, well, how solid was the relationship ever to begin with? And when you hear horrific stories of parents who kicked their child out of the house because they thought they were one thing or one person, but then discovered that no, there's someone else, and they say, I don't recognize you. Go, leave, never to return again. And you wonder, wow, what would cause a parent to outcast their own flesh and blood? Oftentimes, people will disappoint us. We have disillusionment. Sometimes they just simply go away. In other words, while we can cherish those relationships in our lives that we feel are solid, if you're dealing with a human being, eventually they're going to disappoint you. They're going to die, they'll do something that you didn't expect, or you thought they were one thing and you turned out to be something else. It happens because it's human nature. So as you go through life and you really are trying to figure out, well, what can I count upon? Who can I turn to really? Will this person be there for me? I would say that in order to really answer that question, you might need to do what Jacob did. We heard the story of Jacob this morning, who traveled to a certain land, and maybe he was trying to get away from his brother, but he traveled to gain clarity. God, what in my life is real and solid? What can I depend upon? Who can I trust? I feel like there's enemies all around me. And it was during that time that he got away and became silent and quiet before his God, that he had connection, he had communion with his God. And as God gave him instruction on where to go next. Jacob, he awakes and he's changed, he's a changed individual, and he wanted to symbolize that connection he had with God. So he built an altar of stones. And upon that stone, he basically said, here will I make my commitment to you. Because I recognize now that even though people in my life can be chasing me down, they want me dead, they will maybe try to use me, but it is you, God, who is solid. It is you who I can trust. It is you I can relax and exhale. Deacon Karen, about a month or so ago, actually it was almost 2 months now, gave a sermon right here from this pulpit. And she talked about the journey that she and Lori had to the El Camino in Spain. And as she said in her message, people will travel to do this pilgrimage for a variety of reasons. For health reasons, because it's interesting, you like the thrill of it. But many people do that because they want to get away from their life and walk with God. That it is a time of clarity. It's a time of realignment. It's a time of just really saying, God, here I am, I'm silent and I'm listening. And so people take that journey all through the mountains and have connections with other people on that same pilgrimage. But at the end, The hope and the prayer is that you gain clarity. I remember a couple of years ago, I was at a place in my life where I was like, what's real and what's not? And so I literally went to the deserts in New Mexico to take that time to figure out, God, what is real? Who am I? Who are you? And it was during that time I was praying, and it was silent. All these birds just showed up out of nowhere. And they're squawking and they're loud. And a little bird jumped on the porch where I was sitting and tried to crawl up my pants leg. So just a little sparrow. Then it came out, and another little bird tried to jump on a twig, almost looked like a blade of grass. And I'm saying to myself, you can't be balanced on that blade of grass. And it jumps on it, falls off. And it jumps back up, and it finds its balance. Blew my mind. It balanced on, and then it started to peck at the seeds or whatever it was pecking at on the tip of this little twig that was almost too light to sustain it. But it did. And it finished, and then all the birds flew away. It was during that time that I gained my clarity. God had to speak to me in a very supernatural way. And for you, you might say, well, there are birds. What's so special about birds? For me, God knew how to capture my attention. I got to the place where I said, I needed to go and I need to have clarity, God. And I'm for real about this. And God spoke to me that was very unique to my heart. And I returned back home with clarity, knowing exactly what I was to do, where I was to go, and what was real and what was not. And I made investments into those things that were real in my life. Maybe you don't have the time or the money or the resources to go on the pilgrimage down to El Camino or travel someplace. But something you can do, and I actually do this all the time, I'm assuming you do have a bathroom in your home. And I would suggest maybe doing it at night. And you go and you shut your door. You sit on your royal throne. And you ask God, what's real in my life? What am I doing? Where am I going? What can I depend upon? Because at every point in our lives, on our journey with God, we need to make sure we have the correct directional signs. So we know which direction we're heading into. And for those of you who have been with us for a while, you know what each of these words mean. But if you are a first-time visitor, allow me to explain. And you can find this within your magazine as well, in the Ignite magazine. That this directional sign basically says that we can be at different points in our relationship with God. Maybe we're at a place where we're searching. We just simply are trying to figure out, again, where we're going, what I need to do. Maybe we're not there, maybe we're further down the way. We're at a place where we know we are changing. Something in our lives and our heart is changing for the better. Well, now you're in a place where you just want to connect with other people again. You're tired of being solo and solitude. You want to break out of it and connect and share with other folks. Maybe you're at a place that it's like I've connected with people and being with other people. Someone said something to me and I need to reflect. I need to listen. I just need to be quiet in my life with God. Or I'm at a place where God is calling me to give more of myself. Not to be a hoarder of sorts and just be so consumed with worry all the time. But God, how can I give up my time and my talent and my treasure so someone else can be blessed? Or maybe I'm at a place where God is simply preparing me for something new. Maybe it's a calling of my heart, of my life, where God is saying, get ready, be prepared, because something is happening, something's changing in your heart, in your life, in your relationships. What's real in our lives? How do we know which direction to go? How do we get from where we are here to the place and that vision that God has placed into our hearts and our minds? We know we need to be there, but we're still here. Maybe I've lied to myself and maybe I should just stay here and not try to progress. What's real, God? And I invite you to get to that place where you're quiet, you're alone. You've taken out all the visual stimulation, and the only thing that's there is your heart and God's. Where you can truly hear the voice of God, and then once you've done it, then you can make a stand for yourself. You see, when I returned from the deserts of New Mexico, and I saw all those birds, I immediately went back into Albuquerque, and I found, this is for myself now, and I found a tattoo parlor. And I got a tattoo of a raven, because I saw a lot of ravens, with outstretched wings. And now I have that as a permanent part on my body. And I did that is because that is how significant that experience with the living God was for me. And that I knew now where my direction was. And now I know how to proceed. I could get away from what's false and fake from what's true. Let's go to the next slide, please. You may have heard this word before, faux. It means false or fake. When Jerry and I left California, and one of the reasons why we left California, people always ask, you're leaving California to come to Detroit? Why? And the thing that I would say is because, really, I got tired of faux liberal people. Because I worked and I lived in Berkeley, California. If you know anything about Berkeley, it's pretty liberal, but it's also pretty wealthy. And there were people who were there that, again, it's like, well, of course I'm not racist. Of course I'm not homophobic. Of course I'm not sexist. Why? Because I live here in Berkeley. And I recycle. And I say that in a kind of joking manner, but it was actually true. There were people who they couldn't see others because their privilege was so thick. That in their minds they thought, well, I'm fine because of where I live, my geographical location, and I know my neighbors, and my neighbors all believe and think the same thing, and we show up to the same rallies. But when it comes to supporting the children, because I used to work at Berkeley High School as the vice principal there, who had less than them, all these parents would push these kids out of the way to make sure their child was number one. But what happened to the equity in society that you just got finished preaching at the rally? Oh, but when it comes to my own house and my own children, and it was everywhere I felt. It was so thick, I just said, Jerry, I'm tired of faux liberal folks. And so we left. And we continued on our journey. Where are you on your journey? And as we begin this new preaching series about what's real love in your own heart and in your own life, as I asked you at the beginning of this message to think about the relationships and think about the things in your life that are solid. I love the video that was at the top that simply asked us the question, again, Are we simply the type of person who can go to the next slide, please? Are you a wait and seer? Or do you trust God here and now? When you're at a place in your life when you are trying to figure out what's real and what's not, I believe that if you have not taken the time to get quiet and silent in your own heart and your own mind, and finding any way to do that, whether it's in Spain or in your own toilet, that you do it. That you make it a priority. And then once you've done that, build that altar. Maybe you're not going to get a tattoo, but you're going to do something to say, God, I heard you. I hear you here and now. Rather than I just had a conversation, well, maybe, I don't know, because you're wrestling with the comforts of your life, the things that you don't want to necessarily give up. When God has asked you to go on this journey, to don't stay where you are, and that yes, indeed, the reason why you have that place in your mind or have that person in your mind is because you're being inspired. You hear the word spirit in there. You're being inspired to do something. God, I don't know how. Get quiet before your God. Listen. You'll hear it. And then when you hear it, put your stake in the ground. Be certain with God to say, I'm willing to give. I'm not going to be at a place where I'm just simply going to wait and see how it works out. But God, I trust you. I heard you. And I'm going to make the actions. So I invite you to reflect upon this question within your own life. What's real? What's solid? What are the things that you can count upon?